We are here. Hey, everybody. Welcome, family. This is the 5th episode, season 2 of New Church Hacks, the webinar series that you live for, right? All right. I'm your sibling, Pastor Terrell L McTyer. I serve as your minister of New Church Strategies in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ New Church Ministry. We are recording this episode. The playback will be available to you at newchurchhacks.com, and there will be other episodes of last things we've talked about from marketing and all sorts of great things. So you do want to go in there and check out those things. This is our digital series, which we provide to you with practical and sometimes peculiar prompts for churches everywhere from start to restart. Today, our episode will be on exploring the Enneagram with 8+ hacks. And this Enneagram thing that is surging across is not new as I've come, but in Christianity, it's rising in popularity, and it has spawned an increased demand for resources from spiritual leaders hoping to identify and discover their personality and how it influences their function. So we hope today to help you through some of that in this hour. Stay tuned to the very end, where we're going to give you 7 totally off topics but invaluable new church hacks. And later there will be time for you to engage all of our conversationalists with some questions. If you think of something that you absolutely need to know, we want you to jump right in and use the Q&A feature or the chat feature and put your question out there right away. We will get to them at the end. If we do not get to your question, no big deal. We'll make sure that you have all of our contact information, and we will make sure that we address some of these at the after show on Facebook Live. So if you're not already following New Church Ministry on Facebook, I'll forgive you, but I want you to jump over and take a tab right now. Grab your phone, do whatever you need to do. Go and like Facebook, on Facebook, New Church Ministry, and Instagram and Twitter and every other social media platform that we're on right now. But specifically on Facebook, we are going to do a Facebook Live episode immediately after this. We're going to jump over there and extend the conversation. Every time we just we don't get everything out that we want to be able to say, so we're going to do that. So join us about 10 to 15 minutes after this episode on Facebook Live, New Church Ministry. This is an active conversation, which means feel free to share any tips or resources that you may have related to the topic. Also, we'd love to know more about who is at this virtual table. So as you've already begun to do, put in the chat, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, where you're from, what you're going through right now, how you're dealing with your children in virtual school. Any one of those things you want to deal with, go ahead and throw that in the chat. We'd love to learn more about you. But first, let me give you into these conversationalists and let you know more about these wonderful people who we have joining us today. The guy with the big Enneagram background showing off already today is Trey Flowers. He is a senior pastor of Downey Avenue Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. He recently wrote his doctoral program on the Enneagram and preaching. And so this is a great opportunity for us to really see how much he's learned to earn that doctorate. He identifies as a 7-wing 8. So that's Trey. And then we have Christiana Rice. Go ahead and wave to the people. Christiana Rice is the leading practitioner and visionary voice in the Parish Collective movement, which is the collective of Christians reimagining what it means to be the church in, with, and for the neighborhood. She will also be the speaker at Leadership Academy coming up in a couple of weeks, September 29th through October 1st. So you do want to register for that at newchurchministry.org, and you don't want to miss her and her partner, Tim Sorens. I think I have their book here of Everywhere You Look. You want to check that out. These people are the truth. So you definitely want to join us next week at Leadership Academy and anything that she has going on. And my good friend Kim Ryan, who is the co-director and pastor of Bethany Fellows, which is a Christian Church Disciples of Christ ministry supporting young clergy in their first 5 years of ministry. I forgot to say, Christiana is a 3-wing 2, and Kim is a 6-wing, 5-ish, 7. She said just depend on when you catch her, but she is definitely all day a 6. And again, my name is Terrell L. I am your conversation leader, and I am a 3-wing 4. All right. We want to know more about you as well. So in a minute, we're going to ask you to take an opportunity to tell us what your number is. Again, if you have questions, throw them over in the chat so that we're able to get those, and anything that you want to know more about the Enneagram. All right, let's bring up this poll for a minute. As we start the poll, we have a really easy question for you. It's simple. What is your Enneagram number? Go ahead. We're going to take a minute. And while we're getting the tabulations in to see how, the diversity of Enneagram in the room, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Trey. And he's going to tell us a little bit about it and about this whole thing and then get us started for the day. My man, Trey.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And yeah, great to see so many other sevens already in the poll, and really impressed that all the sevens were actually here on time to take the poll. So thanks for representing my fellow sevens out there. One of the things that we were talking about when we were planning this is we want this to be really helpful for those of you who already know the Enneagram. How do we actually use it and apply it to our ministry, whatever your ministry may be? But we also don't want to leave anybody out. If you don't know about the Enneagram, we're not really going to be able to get to the level to help you identify your number per se today. But there's some really great resources out there that we're going to point you to and hope that you'll follow up with. And our hope is that our presentation today, even if you don't know the Enneagram at all, that you can take some ways to learn the Enneagram and apply it through what does this mean for people who are serving in ministry. But real quick, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Enneagram, or a recap for those of you who are, the Enneagram is all about personality. The basic theory is that there are 9 personality types, and every single person on the planet, every single person in this chat, every single person in your congregation where you might serve falls into one of these 9 personality types. That type will never change your whole life. And I know there's a lot of really great personality systems that are out there. Maybe you've done Myers-Briggs or the DISC system or StrengthsFinder or any of those other great things that help us understand ourselves a little bit better. And I've done a lot of those, but I can tell you that the Enneagram is the only one I would say that has changed my life. Mm-hmm. I wonder with a lot of you who are here in the chat today, and I know that a lot of you would say the same thing about the Enneagram. The Enneagram helps you understand yourself in a whole new way. And today we want to focus on how is it that all of that way that the Enneagram has changed our life, how can it change our ministry? How can it change our churches in a way that equip our churches to change the world? You might know that the Enneagram is, some say, 2,000 years old. There's not a lot of written history about the early years of the Enneagram, but people say it goes back to the desert mystics. This is centuries old wisdom that's been passed down. But it's only been written about for the last maybe 20, 30, 40 years. It's really become popularized. A number of great books out there. Some of you might have read The Road Back to You by Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron. It also points you to, if you've already read The Road Back to You, it's a really, really great primer just to get a glimpse of the Enneagram, learn a little bit more about your number. But if you haven't yet run across Richard Rohr's book, which is called The Enneagram, A Christian Perspective, this is a book that I have gone back to time and time again as I wrote my doctoral project on the Enneagram and preaching. It was amazing the ways that Father Richard Rohr could help just really deepen the wisdom of the Enneagram. So if you're looking to dive deeper after today, I encourage you to check out that book. And if you already know the Enneagram really well and you want like a thesis level, like fall asleep every night for the next 10 years, check out Rizzo and Hudson's book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram. It's about 500 pages long, and literally anything you would ever want to know about the Enneagram is in this book. But Rizzo and Hudson also have a website called the Enneagram Institute. So if you go to the enneagraminstitute.com, a lot of that information is already on there, including you can learn more about your number or how your number resonates with other types out there. But again, every single person on the planet falls into one of these 9 personality types. And every one of those 9 types has some kind of different core motivation that explains why it is you do everything that you do. Imagine if you could go into church on Sunday morning or whatever day that your community gathers and explain why every person in the room does what they do. This is life-changing stuff. But remember that when we talk about the Enneagram, we're talking about that motivation, why you do what you do. And that is worlds different than necessarily what you do. And a lot of times when you learn the Enneagram, you get lost on that, what you do. You get lost on, I'm a 7, and so I do this stuff. And you might get confused and say, but I'm not a 3, but I do a lot of things that 3s do. And that goes back to the fact that it's not just about what you do. It all comes back to why you do what you do. So we're not going to have time to really unpack that for each number, but I wanted you to go from here. If you don't know your number, go and look for those core motivations and ask yourself, what is it that explains who I am? That helps me uncover what Thomas Merton calls the false self, this personality we put on top of ourselves to kind of hide ourselves from who we really are, from who God made us to be. So there's lots of different lingo that you'll hear when people talk about the Enneagram. You might hear people talk about wings and where you go in stress and security and healing messages, all of these different things. You don't really need to worry about all of that today. If you don't know all of that stuff, that's okay. Again, we're not going to diagnose your particular number today, but as much as we're going to look at how do we use the Enneagram to transform our communities. So with that, that's just a quick primer, quick snapshot that doesn't begin to do justice to the Enneagram, but hopefully that fills you in a little bit on where we're coming from today. And now we're going to move to the actual reason you're here, which is how we do this stuff. How do we use the Enneagram in our communities? And so it's my great privilege and honor to turn it over to a very dear friend, Kim Ryan, who is the director of the Bethany Fellows program. Shout out to all the Bethany Fellows who are out there today. Kim and the Bethany Fellows are the group who first introduced me to the Enneagram almost 10 years ago now. And she's such a great conversation partner and just full of all sorts of wisdom about the Enneagram. So let's give it up, Kim Ryan.
Thanks, Trey, and thank you, Terrell, for this invitation. I'm really so pleased to be here and be a part of this. I'm going to cover a couple of areas, but before I get to the specific areas, I'm talking about the Enneagram and the self and relationships and our spiritual practices, just a bit of my own story of relationship with the Enneagram. I've learned first that the Enneagram teaches us compassion. I would say even tenderness, but maybe not at first. And so my own story with the Enneagram is that I really approached it from a place of skepticism and resistance and frustration and even resentment. My good friend Laura Freegan, who is the lead pastor at First Congregational Church in LA, was all about the Enneagram. She could talk numbers with the best of them, and I just found it incredibly irritating. And then Laura arranged for the Bethany Fellows, these young pastors in their earliest years of ministry, to have an afternoon with Suzanne Stabile in Dallas about 7 years ago. And Suzanne was one of the authors of the book that Trey mentioned. Suzanne was mentored by Richard Rohr for 5 years before she began leading Enneagram workshops. And she has really excellent resources. Trey mentioned one. I'm going to also mention The Path Between Us, which is an Enneagram journey into healthy relationships. That's an outstanding book. But Suzanne spent the afternoon with us. And I have to say, after one afternoon, that Enneagram instruction changed my life forever. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. So Suzanne told us, when I get to your number, and she was describing the numbers and telling stories about the numbers, when I get to your number, you will feel like you are going to throw up. That was encouraging. So as I listened, I was listening for what my number might be, and she started in with the 8s. 8s are the challengers. Then 9s are the peacemakers. 1's the perfectionist. 2 is the helper. 3's the achiever. 4's the romantic. So far, we're pretty sure those weren't my number. 5's the investigator. Then she got to 6s, the questioner, the ones who are fearful and need to feel secure. Trey mentioned motivation, that need to feel secure. And as I listened to Suzanne, I thought, oh, that's my mother. And I have spent most of my life trying very hard not to be like my mother. But the longer I listened, that's when the nausea began. And I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. There was one number left that might rescue me, 7s, the enthusiast. No, I was clearly a 6. I came away from those few hours beyond being appalled at that realization with a much deeper understanding of myself. The Enneagram is different from other personality measurements. Trey mentioned that as well, like Street Finders, which I really love. But the Enneagram invites us on a journey to see our shadow or to recognize how negative motivations may be operating within us. And it helps us be able to move toward our truer selves. So my first hack is to say that the Enneagram can invite you into more compassion and tenderness with yourself. Here's a bit more about that. The self, interpersonally, that's where the Enneagram can be extremely helpful and beneficial. With this deeper understanding of oneself can come deeper compassion for oneself. I think one of the greatest gifts of the Enneagram is the invitation to be a gentler witness to oneself. So here's a story. In April, my grandson, who is 7, was with us for a week, and we stepped into online learning with him. And I have to tell you, it was crazy hard. It was just harder than I could have ever even imagined. And suddenly I went from my basic norm of sickness, anxiety, looking for security, to my stress number, which was a 3. And I just zipped right over to Achiever, and I became the most driven grandma on the planet. That's what I do when I go to 3. I became driven to help Oliver get all of his schoolwork done, not just get it done. We were going to get it done with excellence. It was not pretty. Oliver looked at me as if to say, "Who are you? And what have you done with my grandmother?" One evening, I had to give myself a timeout with a glass of wine on the front porch. And that's when I realized what I was doing to myself and to Oliver. And the Enneagram gave me the language and the realization, and I could laugh at myself and forgive myself and ask Oliver to forgive me. So moving to the second hack, the interpersonal relationship hack. The Enneagram can be an invitation into greater understanding and tenderness with your beloveds and your acquaintances and your enemies. The Enneagram sheds light on relationships. It's been called a tool, like a translator even. It helped me understand my mother with more patience. It helps me understand my sweetheart, who is a 1, a perfectionist. So when he is loading the dishwasher or reloading the dishwasher, as the case may be, I can smile and nod and walk away rather than be offended. And supposedly, by the way, that's the best test to see if you're a 1, if you really must reload the dishwasher. And also if you have a constant inner critic. They tell us that being a 1 is one of the hardest numbers to be in the world. The first rule of Enneagram is you can't determine someone else's number. It is also the first rule that we novices break immediately, because it's just so much fun to figure out other people's numbers. It's best if you and your significant others can come to an understanding of the Enneagram together, because it does give that powerful common language. It can also be a helpful tool with other leaders with whom you work. I'm actually the co-director of Bethany Fellows, and the co-director Melanie Harold Delaney and I regularly support one another and sometimes call one another on our Enneagram numbers. It can help you work with staff members, lay leaders, colleagues. It can be really beneficial with people you may not like or you find especially challenging. And there's a good chance the person that you don't care for may actually share a number with you. It gives you a chance to practice compassion, not only with yourself, but with them. I think it's okay to introduce the Enneagram to someone else, talk about your experience with it, and then let them do their own work and exploration with your support. It gives all of us a chance to name and adjust and even change our actions. I almost said change ourselves. We can't really do that. As Trey indicated, our numbers stay our numbers, but we can modify our actions, and it can empower us to relate and lead with love rather than judgment, and again, to offer tenderness. So my last hack is that the Enneagram can call you into a deeper spiritual practice that will bless you and the world. The Enneagram sheds light on our relationship with the sacred, with the spirit, the divine, within and beyond. And it can inform our spiritual practices and nurture our souls. Some numbers need stillness. Stillness as a counterpoint to control that brings more freedom. Those are 1s, 8s, and 9s. Some numbers need solitude. And solitude teaches us to be present to God, be present to ourselves and to others with no strings attached. Apparently, those are 2s, 3s, and 4s. And some of us need silence and the practice of silence, turning down the inner noise and listening to the voice of God in our lives and to the people who speak loving words of truth and affirmation over us. Those are our 5, 6, and 7s. The Enneagram is deeply layered. I have spent 2 full days and evenings with Enneagram leaders attending Know Your Number workshops. I've read several books, and always there is more to learn. It is not simple. It is beautifully complex, as that diagram behind Trey would let us. It has layers and layers, gifting more and more understanding. I would say it may be possible that congregations have dominant Enneagram personalities. I remember Suzanne saying that Dallas, Texas, even cities, Dallas, Texas is a 3 kind of city, achievement-oriented with eyes toward appearances. And that's intriguing to think more about. So the 3 hacks that I'm offering: more compassion and tenderness with yourself, greater understanding and tenderness with your beloveds or your enemies, and a deeper spiritual practice that will bless you and the world. And now I'm delighted to hand this over to Christiana. I've just met her as she and Trey and I and Terrell have been working toward this afternoon. And I cannot wait to hear what she is going to share with us about how we take the Enneagram even wider. Oh, wait, was I supposed to do Trey?
You know what? Let's go to Trey.
Yes.
Let's go to Trey first.
I thought I gave you a very lovely introduction, and then you just pretended like I didn't exist. But
My good friend Trey Flowers.
you get credit for introducing me to the Enneagram in the first place. So,
But real quick, Kim, that was so wonderful. I have like notes, and I love your words on compassion and how we lead with love and not judgment. And so, thank you for what you shared.
Thanks. So Trey Flowers, who is such a delightful person and a fabulous pastor, and I'm excited to hear what Trey's bringing about the work that he's done, not only with his doctorate, but the wider work, Trey, that I know you've done with understanding the Enneagram and bringing it into the life of the congregation and your ministry as a pastor.
thank you. You totally redeemed yourself there. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So the way that Kim and Christiana and I have organized this is we want to kind of move you through different ways you can use the Enneagram. So Kim started with some really great ways of how you yourself can use the Enneagram. How do you develop your own spiritual practices? What is God doing inside you? And I want to move to the next level is, how does your community, your congregation specifically, use the Enneagram? So I'm going to unpack a few hacks. I'm coming at this from the perspective of a local congregational pastor. I have the great privilege of serving at Downey Avenue Christian Church in Indianapolis, and we've done some work with the Enneagram together. And so my language is coming at this from the lens of pastor to congregation, but I don't want you in any way to feel limited if you're not a pastor or if you're not serving a congregation. Don't feel like these tips are only limited for that. If you're serving in a business, a nonprofit, or just a household, substitute the word congregation for community. Whatever leadership role you are serving in right now, I hope that these are helpful. And the first thing, before I actually get to a hack, is I want to just reiterate one thing that Kim said, which is before we get to how to use the Enneagram, the most important thing to start with is how not to use the Enneagram. So please, please, please don't go around guessing what people's numbers are and saying, hey, guess what? This is your core motivation. The only way that you know a core motivation is to be the person who has that motivation. If you're not that person, you might be able to observe some traits and behaviors, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily their Enneagram number. So please don't try to use the Enneagram to fix your community or your congregation, but rather use it as a way to listen more fully to the wide variety of personalities that are already there in your community. So that's the caveat. The first hack that I want to share with you is to strengthen your congregational connections through the Enneagram. So think about your community as a whole, all the different, the web, just like the map behind me. Your community is a interconnected network, a map of all these different relationships that are built. So how is it that we can use the Enneagram to strengthen those relationships? Lots of ways. If you are serving in a pastoral role or a counseling role, or if you're just the person in your office that people come and talk to and look for advice, the Enneagram is such a great way to invite conversation about that personal growth that we just heard Kim talk about. So when we're in leadership roles, we have the privilege of using this as a tool for what Kim talked about. So one-on-one counseling, pastoral care, when you're talking with people, invite them to join this Enneagram journey. Like Kim said, it's a never-ending well of things that you can continue to learn about the Enneagram. So invite them on that process. Maybe if you know the Enneagram well enough, you could walk through all 9 types with them. I have a smaller version of this map. I don't sit behind this in my office at the church, but I've got a smaller version that I share with people when they come in. And if this is something that they've identified they want to talk about, I walk them through each one of those 9 numbers and help them think about which one might be their core motivation. If you're not at that point, if you don't know the Enneagram well enough to be able to do that with somebody, don't try it necessarily. Start by recommending one of those Enneagram books that we've been talking about. The Road Back to You is a really wonderful, it's a quick read. It's a really accessible read. So whether people have been through seminary or have no experience in higher ed at all, The Road Back to You is a really accessible book that almost anybody can pick up and just kind of go through in a week or two. And really figure out what their number is. So that's a great resource. And it might be that you do a congregational book study, that you as pastor might not necessarily be the expert on the Enneagram, but maybe you all read the book together and read about one number each week and meet over Zoom. As a worst case scenario, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud, there are some online tests that are available. But really, please don't just like send people the link to the test and think that that is how people figure out their number. They're not scientifically validated. They can be helpful tools to maybe narrow down what somebody's number is, but don't like go into premarital counseling with somebody and say, take the test and then we'll be able to diagnose all of your problems. Really, the only way you can figure out your number is that core motivation. So it's a journey, and invite people to that journey. But once they're on that journey, there are all sorts of ways that you can use the Enneagram. So premarital counseling, like I just mentioned, is a great way to use the Enneagram. I walk with couples as they come in for premarital counseling. If they choose wanting to learn about the Enneagram, I walk them through different how they can learn their number, and then we look at how does type A interact with type B. On the Enneagram Institute website, you can look up any single number and see how it interacts with any other number. So if you have a 7 and a 2 in counseling, there's a really great resource out there on the Enneagram Institute, and it will highlight a lot of the issues that the people are facing, a lot of the strengths that people have to build on. Another thing you could do to strengthen those connections is think about a whole community kind of setting. How is it that your church, your community, your office could take an Enneagram training together, bring in a facilitator or somebody who can present the numbers, or again, read the book together. At our church, we hosted a community workshop, and we opened it up not just to our congregation, but to the wider community. And it brought in lots of people from our neighborhood and beyond who wanted to come in and learn about the Enneagram. Maybe you could incorporate the Enneagram in your leadership training. If you have an elder training, it'd be a great resource for them, not only to learn their own number, but to learn about all the different personality types that are out there in the congregation, so that they can connect with the people that they're serving more fully. So hack 1, use it to strengthen those peer-to-peer, those one-on-one relationships that are out there in the congregation. Hack number 2, reimagine the team around you using the Enneagram. So lots of ways you can do that. And I think this is where it really gets concrete. You can use the Enneagram to think about your staff team. Maybe if you're hiring somebody, perhaps help them figure out what their Enneagram number is, invite them on that journey, and figure out how their Enneagram number interacts with your Enneagram number. When you know those things, the Enneagram becomes a great opportunity, a tool to balance strengths and weaknesses. Like I, as a 7, am great with big ideas and new projects, not so hot with the details and following through on things. And so when there are people on my staff team or our congregational leadership, when we're electing those people, I make sure that we have a 1 and a 5 in the room, so that when we're coming up with ideas together, that I'm not going to forget it the next day and it just goes away. Imagine the team around you using the Enneagram. Think about how you're balancing those different centers. And then also, if you've already got your people in place, again, learn your numbers together. It's a great, almost devotional type read. Go through it as a staff team. Go through it with your office or with your elders. Do that community workshop. And again, once you know that information, you can identify and look up those type compatibility reports. It's not just for romantic relationships. It's also great for office relationships. As a 7, there are things that I need in order to be able to do my job well. There are going to be things that I'm really not good at. And when I can identify those up front, it helps the people around me learn how they can work better with me. And then the opposite is true too. How can I support people better by knowing their personality type? And then the last thing I'd say about this hack is use the Enneagram like as a strategy for how you plan your board meeting. Whatever meeting it is that you're having, when you craft the agenda, don't just copy and paste last month's agenda and do it the same way you've always done it. Really put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to be in that room. So if you've got 1s, I guarantee you they're going to want that agenda sent out ahead of time so that they can follow along in the meeting. If there's 2s in your meeting, then have a time to check in. Do that personal team building, the highs and the lows, the sharing, so that the 2s feel that they're more connected to the team. If you got 3s in your team, establish some group goals. Celebrate achievements and accomplishments that people have been doing to help the 3 feel like their work matters and has made a difference. If you got 4s on your team, when you're planning those meetings, do something creative. Maybe start by reading a poem or asking somebody to bring in a YouTube clip to show about the meeting. Bring in some kind of creative way that's different than the last time you did it. If you got 5s in your meetings, that cerebral type, give them detailed information on the budget, those little lines in the budget that nobody else wants to read. The 5s want to read every single one of those. Just like the 1s, send that out in advance. They'll love to go through it and they'll come to the meeting more prepared because of it. 6s, don't spring new information on a 6 during the meeting and ask them what they think about. Again, send it out ahead of time. Say, here's what we're going to be thinking about. Think through it and bring your ideas. For all the 7s out there, you know we love pictures and things that are colorful and illustrations and all those things that keep us interested so that we can really bring our best selves to be visionaries and to bring ideas. But if we're bored with what's happening in the room, we're going to be zoned out. So find ways to engage the 7 that are creative and fun, just like you do with your 4s. With 8s, give them a particular part of the agenda. 8s love to be in charge. So give the 8 in the meeting, say, hey, will you be in charge when we get to this topic? Can you present it and help run that conversation? they're going to focus the whole rest of the meeting if they know they're going to get to be in charge. If you've got 9s in there, pay attention to who has not spoken. Don't just assume that when the conversation's over, everyone's opinion has been voiced. Give space to say, now, is there anybody else who hasn't gotten a chance to speak? And probably the 9s out there who didn't want to infringe on anybody else will love that chance that you invited them into. So think about the ways that you can use the Enneagram to reimagine the teams around you. And the last hack I want to share with you is let the Enneagram put yourself in the pews. And sorry to those of you who are not preachers, this one is more specifically for preaching, but I want to spend just a couple minutes here because this is what I wrote my doctorate on, and what I've been really excited about is thinking about how do we use the Enneagram to preach more fully to all the people who are in our sanctuary. If you're a preacher, I can guarantee you, no matter the size of your church, there are probably all 9 types in your sanctuary or wherever you meet who are listening to your sermon. And when I wrote my doctorate project on this, my operating assumption is that if we're not careful, we probably preach the types of sermons that our personality types would want to hear. When I look back at my own preaching, that was definitely the case. So many of my sermons are 7 sermons. The big ideas, the optimism, what's possible, let's look to the future together. And I realized that when all I did was talk about the positive and the happy things in the future, I was leaving out the 4s who really need their pain validated. I was leaving out the 6s who are really worried about the present moment right now and get a little freaked out by talking about the future all the time. So when we use the Enneagram, we can look at our own preaching, our own sermons, and actually go back and look at your sermons if you're a preacher. Look at your different messages and say, which personality type would resonate with this sermon and which one did I leave out? And really pay attention to that over time. Maybe you even want to develop a panel of people in your congregation. Get a type 1 and a type 2 and a type 3, all the types on a panel and say, let's get together once in a while, meet with one of them once a week and say, as a type 1, how'd you hear that sermon? Did I speak some kind of healing message to you? Were there ways that I engaged you in the sermon? Are there ways that I left you out? And I can guarantee you the feedback that you get from a 3 is going to be way different than the feedback you get from a 5. So use the Enneagram to put yourself in the pews, to really expand your preaching and look beyond your own personality type alone. And I want to wrap up by just giving you some real concrete strategies. So I'm going to run through these real quick as some tips to throw out there. So the Enneagram can speak to the substance of what you are preaching, and I think that's what matters most. And I think it's its greatest gift. How are you speaking those healing messages? But it also can say a lot about how we preach. How do we communicate the good news? And so here are some tips. For type 1s, provide an outline of key points that the 1s can use to take notes. I grew up in a church where the minister had every line, like you could fill in the outline as he went. And I never understood who was sitting there doing homework in church. When I did my doctorate project, I realized it's the 1s. The 1s need that outline. The 1s love to follow those outlines and get all the blanks filled in and do it right. For type 2s, make the sermon personal. Share some kind of personal anecdote related to the main sermon theme. Tell a story from your life. For type 3s, set a goal for what growing in faith this week looks like. For type 4s, incorporate a quote or a story of some kind from marginalized voices that help celebrate the beauty of God's diversity. For type 5s, include a statistic, an interesting fact, some kind of study from another field that they can go and tell people about. Type 6s, acknowledge the fear of what might go wrong. Type 7s, use humor. Use visual aids. Do whatever you have to do to keep our attention. Type 8s, challenge some kind of existing perception related to the scripture. Tear down a norm. Tear down the status quo. The 8s will love seeing a strong leader challenge. And 9s, end the sermon with one clear action step. Here's what you can do this week. Here's where you can get started to live out this scripture. So those are a few of the ways to help your preaching, hopefully, and think about your congregation, your community. And now, without wasting any more time, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Christiana.
Okay, that was so great, Trey. Thank you so much. And I am thrilled to be here because I have been, like my sister and my brother here, both Kim and Trey, I've been steeped in the Enneagram, kind of marinating in it for a while. I'm going on, maybe around 14 years. And I was just realizing as both of you were talking, I'm still learning. And this is the beauty of the Enneagram. It is this kind of never-ending well, and I feel like I could even continue with the metaphor of the well, where it's this nourishing, the deeper you get, honestly, the more you find. And I think it is an invitation to a journey, like you said, Kim. It's an invitation to a lifelong journey. It's also an invitation to a journey to become better listeners. And I think, again, to frame what we're doing here, we wanted to start with this deep listening to self, this kind of contemplative space. So there's your first C. And the second was this space of the community or the congregation. There's your second C. And then I'm going to take us into the third C, which is Enneagram in our context. So I'm going to, once again, if you want to embody, by the way, the Enneagram has a body, and that's your body. And that's also the body, the community in which we are a part of. And that is also the embodiment in a real place. So if we want to kind of go with heart, the contemplative, to the community, and if you can almost picture holding hands, and then out, given out in connection with the wider context that we are all inhabiting, or we should be inhabiting. That's the invitation. Where are we inhabiting? And how is the Enneagram helping us be more faithfully inhabiting the transformative love of God in that place? So I'm going to just jump in with my hacks, because usually I actually do a lot of this with teams. I love working with a variety of teams. I recently did an Enneagram team connection training with a group of local coffee shop managers. And what this unearths in all of us. I mean, it's vulnerable. Kim, in your story you brought up, I actually noted that when you were listing the qualities of the one and the two, or the titles of the one and the two and three, every one of them was pretty strong and positive. And then when you got to the 6, you were like, and they're the fearful ones, and no, Kim, they're the loyalists. They're the courageous ones. We need the 6. In fact, every type brings a glimmering virtue and gift into the world. And I think that's God's idea. So that we all have a place in the mission of God, in the dream of God to transform all things. I'm convinced. I'm going to spend my life trying to figure that out. So here we go. So my first hack is love your neighbor with your Enneagram type. So that word with, I've been playing with it. I thought, is it with your Enneagram type? Is it through your Enneagram type? Is it as your Enneagram type? You could use all three, right? I think if you said love your neighbor as your Enneagram type, essentially you must love yourself. You must trust yourself. You must know yourself, that when I enter into this neighborhood in which I'm inhabiting the love of Jesus in this place, I do have to trust that God's already given me all that I need to love well in this place. But also, as I go into this place, I love with my Enneagram. So here I am. I'm an Enneagram 3, right? Just performing my way. But there are gifts. I think too, Trey, what you were saying in the end there about shaping sermons or learning environments of discovery to really attend to the uniqueness of each Enneagram type. We need to also drop deep, right? So for the 3, I'm not actually at my best, at my deepest, at my most authentic self. I'm not as concerned about how well I performed as I am concerned about, was it honest? Was it true to myself? So the invitation in loving our neighbors is true self. It's authenticity. It's knowing ourselves. It's saying, heck yeah, I'm a pretty good Enneagram 3 in my neighborhood. And I want to live fully as an Enneagram 3 in this place, because I actually trust that God wants to do something with me in this place. And it's the same as a 1. So boy, if one's out there and love their neighborhoods, truly trusting that you are a champion of righteousness, of what is right and good, because you see the goodness in every single neighborhood. Woo! That's the mission of God at work in our place, right? Amen? Sisters, brothers, friends, if you are a 2, and you love yourself well, and you're tending to your own needs well, and you know that your bleeding heart is a gift to this place, thanks be to God, people will be healed by the unconditional love that you get to embody. And then I'll skip down to the, you forgot, actually, Trey, you forgot about the Mountain Dew. So for an Enneagram 7, show us your Mountain Dew, my friend. He's got his Mountain Dew.
The official drink of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think, there it is. I think every sermon, every, you know what? I'm going to go back and add a tip to Trey's tips. If you're doing a meeting, you got to bring Mountain Dews for the Enneagram 7s. But Enneagram 7s, if you're going to love this place and love your neighbors, if an Enneagram 7 is in their healthy, integrated whole place, which of course we all are and aren't all the time. We're both integrated and healthy, and we're both struggling and stressed and trying to figure ourselves out. And we're continuing to heal. But as we enter into our healthy place, Enneagram 7s don't care about things fluffy and fun for fun's sake and meaningless parties. No, they want true joy. They want the whole place to embody the complete picture of what joy is in a place. I'll extend place also into, if I'm using the word context, that can also be your circle of friends, distance circle of friends, perhaps, your school community, the civic community that you're a part of, your work setting, your context. I'm inhabiting this neighborhood, but even in this place, there are civic realities, there are environmental realities, there are educational realities, there are social realities. So hack number 2, Enneagram can be used. So use the Enneagram for asset-based ministries. So think through these 4 commons again, with the civic and the social, the environmental, the educational. What are the assets? The assets-based community development is about uncovering the potential, right? It's about identifying. It's saying that land, that hard soil right there actually is the bedrock of something beautiful and life-giving and nourishing to grow, burst out of that. It just has to be nourished. Somebody has to see it. Somebody has to tend to it. And every Enneagram type can tend differently. And also every place has potential and already exists within it, the Enneagram gifts. So how do you identify those things? I want to touch back. So let me check my time. Ooh, 2 minutes. We got this. Real quick, what you said earlier, Kim, around how even, you talk about Texas and the Enneagram type of Texas. I was thinking about the Enneagram type of Golden Hill. That's the name of my neighborhood. I've never thought this way before. I've often thought more regionally, right? But I thought today I'm going to think about my neighborhood. I think my neighborhood is an Enneagram 4 neighborhood. And here's why. We are a neighborhood of creatives. We are a neighborhood of self-expression. We are a neighborhood of recovery. We're a neighborhood of addiction moving toward freedom and liberation that actually brings about the transformation that all of humanity and all of creation longs for. And so the Enneagram 4, the qualities and gifts of the Enneagram 4 in Golden Hill, thanks be to God, I believe it. I'm going to live it out. And as a 3, heck yeah, I'm going to go after that. Okay, third hack, build missional teams with Enneagram awareness. And I won't just, Trey, your description of each of the types on a team and awarefulness of who is on your team, who you need on your team, all of that. I'm not going to restate that. Instead, I'm just going to say, go to Trey, do what Trey said, and also extend your sense of team beyond your church community or beyond your Christian community or beyond your friends or beyond your family or beyond the people you like. Think about your context and know that actually the mission of God is at play in your context, utilizing all of the different kinds of people that we get to collaborate with. So if you are throwing a block party on your street with your neighbors, build some teams that think about what kind of block party each Enneagram type would like. Because the kinds of teams that you build, the connections you strengthen, back to the words you used, Trey, strengthening connections means we collaborate across differences in our neighborhoods, across contexts, across neighborhoods, so that our blind spots are revealed. Oh, there's my timer. And so that we can continue on this lifelong journey of growth and of listening. Because I would say at the end of the day, if we all become better listeners, we have accomplished something. And that's spoken from an Enneagram 3 who likes to accomplish things. All right, Terrell, you're back in. Back to you.
You did it, Christiana.
Hey, I mean, 10 seconds off,
I know how important
no, come on.
words are to us. Friends, oh my goodness. That was, I know that was so much better and richer than I expected. Like, each and every single one of you contributed so amazingly to our understanding of this paradigm. And so thank you so much for us to understand how to better do ourselves, how to understand ourselves, how to understand our congregations and our communities, and then our contexts. So thank you all so much. Guess what? We don't have time for questions now. But you gave us a lot of information. So everyone who wants to ask questions, like, we collected quite a few questions. We want to invite you to join us on Facebook Live. Right after this, in about 15 minutes, we're going to go to Facebook Live. So New Church Ministry on Facebook. And we'll get a chance to unpack several of these questions. There were questions about the resources. They gave some books. If you want to go to actual questionnaires and tests like that, you can go to the Enneagram Institute. They have a great resource there. There's lots of questions about facilitators. I think there are all sorts of resources about that. We're going to give a moment for our conversationalists to give their information. So if you want to reach out to them about maybe even doing some facilitation from them, they might offer that, or know others that they could be a part of. Other questions about how to use it in teams and community, lots of great questions. So we definitely want you to join us on Facebook Live so we can get into more of those questions. All right. Like I said, we're almost at the end here. Thank you so much for joining us for this entire webinar. Please consider all the many ways in which you or your congregation might be involved with New Church Ministry and the movement in your region, or partner with a disciples church within your community. If you know of any potential church planters, please send them my way. I love to welcome them into the Christian Church Disciples of Christ family. And for more information about our next episode, or to share today's playback, you can get all those at newchurchhacks.com. We will have those ready for you soon. To connect with New Church Ministry, or to register for Leadership Academy, like I told you about earlier, where Christiana is going to be speaking here in a couple of weeks. It is our premier church planting training event. We're going to be talking about so many amazing things. You don't want to miss it. You can also go to newchurchministry.org. Now, where can they get a hold of you all? Trey, Kim, Christiana.
Yeah, I'll hop in, right? Is that sorry.
Christiana, Trey, Kim.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm gonna jump in. So yes, I'm really looking forward to the Leadership Academy. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Hey, Leadership Academy. And part of this is, I just want to again shout out for the two of you. One of the things that we do with the Parish Collective really is helping you live into the dreams of God and becoming the church in your everyday neighborhood, in your everyday lives in your neighborhood. So parishcollective.org, and also email me, because we are creating these clusters of regional learning communities. Like the Enneagram, learning to live into the dreams of God in place has to be done learning with others across difference. So email me if you want, Christiana@parishcollective.org.
Yeah, and again, I'm Trey Flowers. Thanks so much for this time. The Enneagram is one of my very favorite things in the world to talk about, and I can go on and on and on, as I did too long earlier. So, but really, I'd love to continue this conversation with you all. I just completed the doctorate work on this, and I'm now working on turning that into a potential book project on publishing about how the Enneagram can be helpful for preaching and delivering more effective sermons for all 9 types. So stay tuned for that. And if there's anybody out there from Chalice Press, hit me up. That'd be great. Love to talk to you about that. But and really, if you are interested in your congregation or your staff team, any level, I'm happy to do Enneagram facilitation. Did the workshop that Terrell was at. That's how we met back in January. Love doing that kind of setting. So if you are interested in doing this with your community, be happy to do that. So it's Trey, Trey, at Downey Avenue, the whole word all spelled out, .com. I'll put that in the chat there.
I'm Kim Gage Ryan, co-director of Bethany Fellows, and Bethany Fellows serves congregations by supporting young pastors in their earliest years of ministry. So if that's you or you know a Bethany Fellow, then check us out at bethanyfellows.org. And also you can email me at kim@bethanyfellows.org.
All right. Thank you guys so much again. And if you are not following New Church Ministry on our social media platforms, please do that. If you want to email me, you can do so at terrell@newchurchministry.org or text me. That's the easiest way to catch me, 317-593-5323, if you have some ideas about some things that you want to get into. All right. Now, here are my 7 totally off-topic New Church hacks for how to break down ministry silos. Okay. Number 1, recognize and acknowledge the silos. That's first. Number 2, watch for common areas where they might exist, like in kids ministry versus student ministry. Number 3, don't let your ministries fight over volunteers. 4, require regular and meaningful communication. 5, open up all channels of communication. 6, perpetuate a high level of agreement on things like philosophy, purpose, and patterns within your ministry. And 7, co-labor on a shared project toward a common goal. That will help you guys break many of those silos down. As ministry leaders, intentionally communicate, coordinate, and collaborate to foster environments where different ministry areas do not function as divided silos, but more like environments where different ministry areas do, not as silos, but more like 2 different boxcars of the same train, connected to one another, heading in the same direction. So to explore how you might collaborate with New Church Ministry, we'd love to do that with you. Please email me again at info@newchurchministry.org. Thank you again for being here with us today, for joining us for this webinar. Again, we're going to jump over to Facebook Live to talk more about it and to get into some of these questions. If you would like to see our very last episode of New Church Hacks of the season, that is going to be on October 28th. Again, at 3:00 Eastern, our last episode is going to be about building a strong financial foundation. I thought this was a good way to end the season as we are trying to figure out how to fund ourselves into 2021. So please join us. DSEP and Bruce Barkhauer from the Faith and Giving is going to be, Center for Faith and Giving is going to be with us, and so many others. It's going to be a fantastic episode to change our minds about our finances. We actually have 2 minutes, so I'm going to do something unconventional. I'm going to jump us back into these questions real quick before we jump over to Facebook. A couple of the questions that came in, if someone want to say really quickly about their recommendations on how to take the best questionnaires. I know, Trey, you were saying live into it, but people do want that jump off point. So maybe help us with that. And then even resources for facilitation. Any one of you.
If you don't have an easy way to connect with somebody who can actually help facilitate that, I would say start by reading The Road Back to You. It's a really easy, accessible, great starting point that should at least help identify your number. Also go to the EnneagramInstitute.com website, and you can read as much as you want to and really connect more deeply about each number.
I would just add, the people I've learned the Enneagram from, they're not keen on surveys. You can do the surveys and it gives you an idea, but you really want to read the books that Trey's just mentioned, look at the websites, and listen to the stories that are being told, and self-identify with through the narratives rather than the surveys. So you can use the surveys, but you may find different results when you turn to the narratives and the books, or listen to a presenter or workshop leader.
All right. Great. Thank you guys so much. Again, thank you for joining us for New Church Hacks, and we will see you next time. God bless.